Hey, what's up, folks? How you doing? Welcome to yet another episode of Cafeteria Science. And in this particular episode, all we're doing today is just telling stories. I would like to give you an interesting backstory that basically was the foundation for all of my intellectual work. The primary reason I decided to put this episode out is it's far easier to critique and criticize sets of beliefs that you do not agree with or sets of beliefs that you broke away from. It's always way too easy to do that, but rarely do people extend an olive branch and say, these are some of the things that I deeply appreciate because they were revolutionary in my life at the time when I was making such a move, or at the time I was existing in this social space. I decided to give a little bit of that backstory to just like help you understand and appreciate everything I love, everything I do, and who I am today. Looking at my life growing up, I don't think I was anybody that anyone would say was heavily interested in school, reading, or was somebody that came across as smart, somebody who was goal oriented. I think I was very indifferent and passive about everything. And I kept morphing into different things throughout my whole educational life. I remember in grade seven, what I primarily used to do during class time is just draw a bunch of comics behind my school books. I would draw like a lot of these weird, interesting comics. I felt my life was more in the artist space, and that was going to be my biggest break in life. Sometimes I wouldn't necessarily think that far ahead, but it's something I over prioritized. I remember dad would constantly push us to study. Dad would always bring different types of literature home, but nothing struck me at the time as interesting, or I wasn't moved by words and literature and reading. I just wasn't that type of person. I enjoyed drawing and making comics. And because of that, that took a very bad toll on my grades. I think that was my grade seven moving forward was like the start of essentially an educational downfall I got into. I flunked my grade seven, and when the results were published, they were just pathetic results. And dad was out there trying to console me, like, um, sometimes we are all placed differently. And these are not really bad results. You should see what your friends have gotten, blah, blah, blah. I had a cousin who was a grade ahead of me. And this cousin was like the smart one. His school life was in order. Sometimes I would envy him. He was just an orderly person. And every time I went to my grandma's house. They had a lot of books there. They had like literature, storybooks that we constantly used to read. My grandma side of the family, the cousins that my grandma used to live with, that was like the smart side of the family. And we all secretly envied them. Like, I wish I was just half as smart as this guy. Because every time my cousin cleared his exams, dad would be so happy. And then for me, every time it was like that time of the year when results have been published, it was always like a time for consolation and time to ensure that my ego is not broken. You're going to be okay. This is not really who you are. Yeah, it was always constantly like that. But even when I went to Granny's place and read all that literature and peered through all that literature, I wasn't interested in the words. I was just interested in the pictures, the art, and all that stuff. I would constantly try to repaint everything I was seeing in the books. I would just repaint those things and not necessarily be interested in reading what that story is merely about. Fast forward, my cousin wrote his grade 9 examinations, cleared with flying colors as per usual. And in grade 9, I started morphing into something else. And my cousin simply uh, always set the bar a bit too higher for me because we were practically peers. In grade 9, I repositioned myself from the art. I now started like developing an interest in music and rap. And at the time, I felt like I'm going to be a rapper. I'm just going to change my life. I'm going to be a rapper. And this is what I'm going to be doing. So I stopped drawing comics now. I started writing music. I started writing rap songs in my math books and flunked my grade 9 exams again. My cousin passed with flying colors, as per usual. Dad was very impressed. I remember when dad was telling us that my cousin just cleared his exam, you could see the look on his face. He was very happy. In that moment, I really envied and hungered for that affirmation and celebratory awareness of my existence. but it never happened. My grade 9 came, flopped that too. Dad would always jump in. At this point, Dad didn't yet give up on me. He was like, no, you know what? These things, they happen. You know, these are normal things. And you're a hardworking guy. You will get there. You have your silver lining very soon. And then I remember at the time, he was like, let's just go look for a place for you to enroll at Munali Boys. And then we'll figure out something, how we can work around this. I remember going there with Dad and an uncle who's late now. We went there trying to sign me up for like classes to grade 10. And then I was told my results were pathetic and I could not be enrolled in like morning classes. They had this divide back in the day. I don't know if it's really there today, where you had morning classes and afternoon classes. And the perception was, or the narrative at the time was, if you're coming in the afternoon classes, you're the dudes that failed, but didn't necessarily fail too bad to a point where you couldn't cross over to the 10th grade. You are the more like the good of the worst. You know, so yeah, I went into, and at the time it used to be called APU. I never really bothered to try to find out what that means, but so I went into the APU session. I was an afternoon dude wearing these ugly gray uniforms. It was like you felt in the back of the narrative, the air, the social space made you feel dumb. Like this is who you are. You are the secondary students. So I started that and I was in the 10th grade doing my thing. But at the time, I still felt like I was going to be a rapper. So I got into ciphers. At the back of the school where there was the football pitch, would gather every day in the morning, go there and start doing like ciphers. We'd do ciphers, play basketball and stuff like that. That's the life. I thought it was a premium life. I was excited about going to school just because of the ciphers. I remember I'd be home late at night trying to master lines that you're going to drop at the cipher, bar after bar, you know what I mean? And then when class time comes, you're practically tired at that point. You just wanted to dodge and knock off early and stuff like that. Yeah. And it's not like I never used to be interested in school. Like I would constantly try to study, try to kick it in me, but it just never used to hit. Never worked. Fast forward, failed my grade 10, failed my grade 11. In the final grade, I started trying to push myself a little bit to the edge, try to like do things straight and all that. But essentially, I was still interested in the rap, the ciphers, and all that stuff. I thought I was just on a breakthrough of selling my biggest record deal. And at the time, I had my late big brother, who was working in South Africa, would constantly tell me, I'm going to get you a studio. I'm going to get you studio equipment and you're going to be making music. One day you're going to come here and you make it big here because here they celebrate talent, you know? And I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do, you know? Got into examination class. And by then, my cousin had already cleared his exams. He passed his grade 12. Dad was constantly talking about him. And he was already enrolling into university. And UNZA at the time, the University of Zambia specifically. And UNZA at the time was like the creme de la creme. You know, if you've made it to go to UNZA, everybody kind of like celebrated you in the family. Like these are the people that we're supposed to be looking up to. You know, there was just that kind of thing where all the cousins and relatives and brothers that made it to the University of Zambia were like, you know, celebrated in a way. So secretly, I also kind of wanted that affirmation, but never quite got to have it, really. Wrote my grade 12, failed my grade 12, failed it so bad. Dad at this point had given up on me. He was just like, I don't know what I can do with this guy. Because I remember Dad was not even interested in finding out what my results were. I essentially just got my grade 12 results and everybody got on with their lives. Nobody cared, nothing, you know. Dad was just like focused on his thing. He essentially just lost hope in me. He was like, okay, you know what, bro? Just try not to be a drug addict or try not to throw your life away. Just be a normal person. You never get to university and you never come across as somebody who's academically smart, but just at least be a normal person. Just be respectable enough to find a viable business you can do. That was like the energy and approach that Dad was giving me at the time. And I was like, okay, all right, you know, this is not really my thing. School is not really my thing. So I got all my nines and just like swallowed them up, like, you know, to hell with this stuff. Continued doing rap, got into poetry and all this stuff.
My lord.
An uncle of mine came to stay with us, came to stay with us from SA. But then, due to some paperwork and travel stuff and complications, he was stuck here. And his life got a bit messy. But in that period when he was staying with us, this uncle of mine is Jehovah is a was a Jehovah's Witness. Then we started staying together. So he was sharing a room. He was sharing my room. I was sharing my room with him. And every day in the night would just have conversations. He started telling me about his beliefs. He started telling me about Jehovah's Witness core doctrines and beliefs. And what stood out for me is not that the beliefs made sense instantly. It's how he had a scriptural backing to substantiate every argument he was putting across. That was like totally new to me. It's almost as if he felt the need to make every argument make sense in light of scriptural interpretation. And this almost philosophical and scientific approach of picking the Bible apart, that was like revolutionary. That was new to me. I thought nobody could approach the Bible in that manner. And one thing I forgot to mention is Dad is a pastor, was a pastor, and very devout. I thought the Bible is just like, you just read it on Sunday. You listen to Dad tell you about it on Sundays, and that's it. That's essentially it. You can read it sometimes to read like stories or religious education in school, but I never really thought you could use it in such an intellectual manner, like to substantiate your arguments, make them make sense, and try to make the beliefs that you hold to make sense based off of like scriptural reasoning. That was like a new thing that started rewiring my brain, just like that. I feel like that was the start of my intellectual awakening. So we constantly used to chat with my uncle. We'd stay up late at night just having conversations after conversations. And this was still the time of load shedding. So most times when power cuts and everybody's indoors just doing their thing, Mom used to like to get everybody together and then she's just singing, they're doing their thing. I would always sit outside with my uncle, just outside watching people pass here and there. And we're just telling stories. He would tell me stories about the stars. He would tell me about the universe and how God is like the central creator of everything. Like he made everything kind of fall into place. He made creation look different. He made everything kind of situate itself in this teleological manner that just appealed to my mind in a unique way I never thought it could ever do. And so he started me up on that path. And I constantly started reading. He had a bag full of like Jehovah's Witness literature. And I started reading all that stuff. I remember the first book he gave me was a yellow book. This is a yellow book that Jehovah's Witnesses use to study with people when they go around in the field ministry. So when you express interest to study with Jehovah's Witnesses or to study the Bible with them, they'll take you on this short little course of sorts where they study that yellow book with you. And then when you get to a point where everything has made sense to you, you can now like consider making that jump and becoming one of Jehovah's Witnesses. My uncle started studying that book with me, but in phases. And then he gave me a book called Young People Ask. It was a volume 2. It was blue. I instantly fell in love with that book. I started reading that book. I read that book page to page, and it instantly started rewiring my life. For the first time, I started slowly growing in love with literature, words, and reading and talking. And it was just like a new experience for me. And even my mannerisms started changing and things like that. So it was around the same time I started having conversations with Dad. I was like, maybe I should try to do like study some sort of like business course I can find that I can do. Because at the time, I just wanted to feel a little useful, Then Dad was like, then I suggested we look for something or try to enroll me at NIPA. So Dad took me there with my result transcript for grade 12. We went there. I remember giving it to the man. He was like, what the heck is this? Dad was essentially saying, look at this thing. What can we do to help this guy? How can we help this guy? What can we do? He wants to study something. And then he was like, okay, what we can do is looking at how terrible his results are, perhaps what we can do is let's enroll him at certificate level for business admin. Then I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds cool. At this point, I was just game for anything. I just wanted to be in university. So I signed up, dad paid up everything for me, and I was sent to Bama campus of NIPA. And there I really succeeded. I grew, I started studying, I learned this new approach, uh, all borrowing from how deep Jehovah's Witnesses kind of wired in me a need and hunger for reading, for literature, for research. And everything just started moving a bit too fast from there. Then I remember this one time, while I was still at NIPA studying and everything, my uncle took me for the Jehovah's Witness meetings at the Kingdom Hall for the first time. And it was almost like a culture shock for me, Yeah. I got there and it was totally different from the church setup that I was very used to. I saw young boys reading huge portions of the Bible at the front, in front of the church, in front of the whole congregation. They would read huge portions of the Bible. Everybody was tasked to do a different thing. There were dramatizations of different scenarios of how to react to people when you meet them in the field ministry. There was like a section where you were reading Watchtower magazines and interacting. People were giving comments. It was like an interactive exchange. And I was there wondering, where is the pastor? Where's the main guy? It's like, there's no main guy here. It's like almost this interesting equalization of everybody. It's like everything was nicely entangled together. It was like an interesting setup. Yeah, and I saw young guys playing very pivotal roles in the congregation. And that just wooed me. I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be, I was very excited at the time, and I instantly felt like this is where I belong. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I started rebranding and recreating myself to position myself to be in that space. Like, these are the people I belong to. I started reading a lot. I was interested in reading. And then Dad found out that this is what I started doing. Dad found out that I was now associating with Jehovah's Witnesses so deeply that it unsettled him, because Dad hated Jehovah's Witnesses and their ideas. He threw away all the magazines that my uncle gave me and kicked my uncle out of the house, and he went to stay somewhere else. And then because of that response, I realized, oh, damn, I need to maybe tone down on this and do it secretly. Then I kept secretly going for meetings until I met this brother. His name was Brother Geshem, who started studying with me. He had a shop in the market. I would constantly just spend time at his shop. At this point, he was my only friend. I would go there. I'll just have breakfast in the morning. That's if I'm not having any classes. I'll just have breakfast in the morning and go there and spend entirely my whole day there. I'll come back home, have my lunch, and go back. He had this huge, he had like this table in his shop full of literature, like Jehovah's Witness publications. And he introduced me to this book, this green huge book. It was almost like an encyclopedic explanation of scripture. It was called Insight on the Scriptures. I was constantly reading it all the time. And I remember he couldn't give it to me to go with it home because I was in my early stages. He couldn't just flood me with all this information, but I wanted to read everything all at once. But he gave me Awake magazines that were talking about creation and all this stuff, and gave me a volume 1 of the Young People Ask book, which I was looking forward to seeing because at the time I only had a volume 2. So I was just buried in Jehovah's Witness literature. And this just started me up on my love for books and for reading. Just like that, my mind was reframed, my priorities were changed, my goals in life were changed, and at this point I started becoming something of a nerd. I was heavily invested in reading books and videos about science and all this stuff. I was almost gradually morphing into essentially a religious nerd and a Christian apologist of sorts. I cleared my certificate examinations at NIPA. And then I told Dad and Mom, I was like, you know what? I don't want to go to diploma level. Why don't you make me resit for my grade 12 certificate so that I can apply for like this very course, but at the University of Zambia at degree level. Dad loved the idea. At this point, Dad had some certain level of confidence in me. He knew that he was talking to a whole different species. He was like, okay, cool. I like that idea. So Dad heavily supported it. Mom got me a space for evening classes at UNZA under School of Education. And then I started my evening classes just like that. I would constantly go there, sit, read, do my thing, and stuff like that. I was just in there. I was heavily invested. Cleared those exams, applied for this business course at the University of Zambia, and I was shortlisted and given my admission letter. Unfortunately, at the time, I did not get picked in what I wanted to study. I was picked in media and communication studies. And how it worked is you simply apply for three viable options on your letter. Then I got picked into another one. But at this point, I was just excited about the fact that I made it to the University of Zambia. That was like so proud. That was like my biggest break in life. Everything came crashing down for me. I had all the confirmation, celebration, acceptance. I felt confirmed in a way that just was revolutionary for my life at the time. Me and dad had differences. We had a rift when it comes to religion, but in this point, I felt like I had won. I felt like I'd made it in life. I felt like for the first time, that approval I wanted so badly for my parents, I finally got it. I finally was somebody who could be celebrated the way my cousin was celebrated. So I got into school, and since mom was working at the University of Zambia at the time, she pushed so hard for me to be given like proper accommodation. I was on the 75% student loan. And from there, my life simply took a different turn. I got into university as a Jehovah's Witness. I was like always in the library. I was just like buried into books. Then I first stumbled across philosophy. I first stumbled across science. I started reading around. I started reading about David Hume, like Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, and all these other interesting Greek philosophers. And just like that, my whole life was rewired and restructured. And I feel the primary reason why I've put out this appreciation video is because it was the Jehovah's Witness narrative, the Jehovah's Witness love for reading and for books and research and trying to substantiate your religious beliefs that got me where I am. I became this person I am today because of the foundation that my uncle laid for me, the Jehovah's Witness Foundation. I didn't get it as a Pentecostal Christian. I didn't get it as a pastor's child. I just didn't get it any other way. And I don't think I would have gotten it any other. If that unfortunate chain of events that led my uncle to come to live with us and to exchange these conversations with me never happened, I don't know where I would have been right now. I would have been probably competing in the rapper space, trying to make a breakthrough with like a pathetic record label and stuff like that, and heavily indebted. The debt is still there. We're still heavily indebted. But my life would have been just totally different. And I don't think any of you would have even met me, or I don't think cafeteria science would have even existed. I don't think I would have even been anything of a writer, a blogger, a person who's heavily invested in the comp space. All this would have never really happened if I didn't have that Jehovah's Witness foundation, that background, that set me off to where I currently am today. Like I said at the outset of the video, it's quite easy to tear things apart. But rarely do many of us just take 2 steps back and be thankful about the foundation that we are criticizing so hard and so bad that it got us essentially where we are today. And so that was the primary reason why I wanted to make this video, because without that foundation, there wouldn't be cafeteria science, there wouldn't be a seraph, there wouldn't be philosophy, there wouldn't be science, there wouldn't be me talking this way. Jehovah's Witnesses taught me everything. They taught me how to speak, how to carry myself, how to read, how to study, how to research. It's almost as if, ironically, they gave me the teeth I used to bite through their flesh. But I will forever be indebted and grateful to Jehovah's Witnesses. Which kind of reminds me, I once had a conversation with a friend, this lady. I was telling her, like, look, if you are a Christian, I think it's central and important for every young Zambian, specifically Zambian, for every young, specifically Zambian Christian parent or household who wants to raise kids, have them raised around some kind of like Jehovah's Witness upbringing. sounds funny right now, but there's a certain way it kind of like rewires a kid's brain towards almost like morphing them into these young thinkers that feel the need to have some sort of like substantial explanation and arguments to the beliefs that they hold to. This is not to say that Catholics, Pentecostals, and Baptists, and these other Christian denominations do not have that or anything like that, but it's almost like a default for Jehovah's Witnesses. It's like a given, you know? So, in case you're thinking of raising kids in a religious setup, just borrow some things from how Jehovah's Witnesses do this, because this is just a cold fact. Jehovah's Witnesses are in line with almost well accepted scholarly uh, literature on the Bible and stuff like that. If you're gonna be a Christian, just be a Jehovah's Witness, or just be like a Christian of a Jehovah's Witness brand. You have nothing to lose, and you'll be slightly in tune with what the Bible is trying to get to as a book and as a piece of literature. Because I feel like they're on the path to closely understanding that book compared to other religions. Yeah. So thank you for giving me the life that